Hi everyone, it's Winnie again. Um, Hopefully you are loving trainings and getting through them. If you're having a hard time or you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. This is the bullying and teasing training, and sorry, I'm like a little far away. This is an important one. One thing that's really interesting about our camp, and I think probably about Camp Cassim in general, is that kids genuinely like each other, and at least from my experience, they're not usually mean to each other. But this is still an important training to remember, and bullying and teasing don't always have to be intentional. People can still be bullying someone on accident or not know that they're being hurtful. So it's important to just kind of know the signs and know what to do and how to handle these situations. So first, let's talk about like if it's ever okay to tease someone. So especially with kids, there's a lot of playful teasing. So kids might tease people about being short or about being like, I don't know, just little funny things that kids tease each other about. But a lot of times teasing can be taken like a little too far. So even playful teasing, like saying, someone is calling someone a shorty once in a while isn't necessarily like a big deal. But that's why as a counselor it's really important to watch the emotions and kind of reactions of your campers to see if you think that's hurtful to them and to kind of be aware of what might, trigger someone or hurt their feelings. There's like talking or making fun of someone's ethnicity, faith, or other characteristic that's out of a person's control, or even something that's in a person's control. Teasing them about something foundational like that is completely unacceptable. But it's kind of like we trust you to make best judgment calls over what's kind of just playful teasing, teasing someone about, liking another camper, or teasing them about things like that might not be a big deal, but for some it might be. So I think it's just really important for you to be aware and be kind of in touch with your campers and their needs. So it's really important to kind of know kind of some facts about bullying and how prevalent it is, because it is a big deal and it is pretty prevalent, and not, like I said, not necessarily at our camp, but it's important to kind of understand. So according to the CDC, 75% of teens have said that they've been bullied, and 81% admit to bullying someone else. So even the kind kids sometimes can say things that might be hurtful or harmful. So bullying is defined as aggressive or abusive behavior intended to hurt another person. It's one-sided, it's deliberate, it can be physical or psychological, and it has a lot to do with power. There's kind of an imbalance of power there. So the bully generally chooses someone that they see as vulnerable, and it can negatively impact the target. So it's important to kind of understand what bullying is about. But it's harmful for kids and it hurts them, and it can have short and long-term effects on children, physically and emotionally, and sometimes it can escalate quickly. So as a counselor, it's your job to keep your kids safe, both physically and psychologically. So it can escalate really quickly if you don't take the time to step in and stop it. So take bullying seriously. Like I said, sometimes it's just like little teasing remarks, but we need to take those seriously, and kind of monitor the kids that those remarks might be targeted at, because we don't know if it's hurtful or if it's just a joke. So it's also important to make sure that you're keeping them safe by not just assuming that the campers will work it out themselves. A lot of the times they might, and that they can, stand up for themselves, but that's not really their job. It's our job to keep them safe and to keep them comfortable. So sometimes there's certain characteristics of a target that can make them more susceptible to being targeted as a bully victim, I guess. Sometimes they're insecure, they can act submissively, they might cry often, and they might have fewer friends. They might be kind of like different, have some sort of difference about them. They might be physically weak. And so those kids are kind of kids to watch out and make sure that they're not being bullied for any of those things. Not that you should, label kids as bullies and targets, but being aware if there are things that make kids different, or there are things that, they are kind of submissive, or, really want to feel accepted, things like that, to kind of watch them and make sure that they are being taken care of and not being treated unfairly or unkindly. And there's also several characteristics of the bully. They have low impulse control, poor problem-solving skills, low empathy, popularity problems, poor social skills, low and fragile self-esteem, negative attribution bias, which is basically attributing negative things to their circumstances and not taking accountability for their actions. But at least with my experience, I think sometimes bullies are the popular kids. Sometimes it can be the kids who do have a lot of friends and don't seem like bad, mean kids, but they might struggle with some of these things internally. So just be careful to pay attention to your campers to recognize maybe they are the kind of popular kid, but do they have low empathy? Do they have a hard time solving problems? Do they have low impulse control? Because sometimes those kids, even if they seem popular and have lots of friends, if they were struggling with some of these things internally, they can still end up being bullies, and we don't want that to happen. So some warning signs might include unexplained damage or loss of clothing or other items, evidence of physical abuse, loss of friends, changes as friends, lack of friends, especially in this age group. A lot of times it's more like social bullying. Like they'll tell kid, we're not talking to her, we're not talking to him, or things like that. It's more like friend structures that they attack, sometimes rather than beating a kid up. So that's important to recognize as kind of shifts in friends. If two friends are, always hanging out and then all of a sudden they're not talking anymore, maybe there's something going on. It might just be a little spat that they need to work through, but it might be that someone's kind of bullying others, or they're using friends as a form of psychological bullying. They're moody, if they're reluctant to participate in activities, if they have problems eating or sleeping, headaches, etc. Those might be signs that some sort of bullying is going on. And then some signs that someone is a bully might include getting into fights, having friends who bully others, being increasingly aggressive, having unexplained extra money or new belongings, blaming others for their problems. They're competitive and worry about reputation or popularity. See, that's kind of the piece we talked about a little earlier. Sometimes people who care about popularity can turn into bullies or can be the bully. So most bully people due to feeling insecure. They want to fit in. They want to be accepted and cared about. They want to feel important in the group. And sometimes it's the children who feel like they don't really fit in, and they experience some sort of social rejection or threat to their role, that they may resort to bullying or reestablish their social position. So if someone's really popular and then something happens and people don't want to hang out with them as much, they might resort to bullying to kind of try to remedy that problem. This can also lead to feelings like depression, isolation, which can lead to more bullying. So now let's kind of talk more about, we kind of talked about bullies, what they look like, targets, what they look like. Now let's talk about how to intervene, especially at the camp setting. At Camp Kesem, we have 3 different steps that we take with bullying intervention. First is to see, second is to teach, and third is to monitor. So first is to see bullies and their behavior for what they really are. Understanding that popularity counts, especially with children. They want to feel belonging and feel worthy and to be liked by others, and that's a big part of their camp experience, and it does make a difference to them. So understanding that and kind of taking that perspective into account as you interact with kids is important. Putting behavior in context is also important. Bullying sometimes means that a child feels like the social order of things is being interrupted, that maybe, like I said, they had friends, a new kid comes in that's more popular than them, and they start bullying them because they feel like their social order is disrupted, that sort of thing. Understanding that and seeing that bullying is a cycle and being able to like put a wedge in that cycle is really important so that that cycle can stop, because bullying won't stop unless the cycle of like popularity stops, or the cycle of understanding that like there's things that lead to bullying and there's outcomes of bullying, and they kind of just cycle around and around. So if you want to stop that, you have to stop not just like one bullying action, but like the whole cycle. Also remembering that bullies are sometimes volatile, and so it's important to approach these situations with care and with empathy and concern for both parties involved. It's really important to not just label one kid as a mean kid or as a bully, but to really think about them and kind of try to empathize with them in their situation. Why might they be lashing out? Why might they be picking on a certain individual? Kind of putting yourself in their shoes and also in the target's shoes. I think it's easy to empathize with targets because there's clearly something going on, but empathizing with both parties and trying to see things through their perspective is really important. So next, once you take time to recognize and to see the different bullying things, see how people are being bullied, it's really important to, like I said, I think the best way to just recognize bullying is to have a good relationship with your participants and with your campers. Because you'll recognize it when someone's being a bully and someone's acting different. You can see social patterns changing. As long as you're being aware and keeping your eyes and ears open for and like getting to know your campers, I think this will be pretty easy to spot. Next is teach. So it's important to teach both the bullies and the targets alternative ways of behaving. So when it comes to, first let's talk about teaching bullies. So first, it's really important to just stop any unacceptable, dangerous, or inappropriate behavior immediately, especially if it's putting a camper, like threatening them or harming them in any way. It needs to be stopped immediately, even before you try to intervene. So if someone's getting, teased for their religion or for, the way they look or whatever it is, it's important to just stop that right away. Don't try to like deconstruct that while it's happening. Just put it into it and then we can talk about it later, especially because that's harmful and we want to stop harmful behavior right away. Next is to listen patiently to both sides of the story without shaming or blaming. Like I said, it's really easy to empathize sometimes with the victim, but it's important to hear out both sides of the story. The next thing is to try to kind of see what part of the child might have, what might have led the child to do this. So what kind of social system like made this child feel the need to bully? Like I said, they feel like their friend group was threatened? Did they feel like someone might have said a mean comment and now they're trying to like lash out because they felt insecure about that? What's going on here? And also the next thing is to just watch out for signs of emotional pain and depression and how you can make this bully feel better. The next thing is to teach the bully alternative ways of having fun and expressing pain and other strong emotions. So sometimes people bully because it's like a fun thing for them and like they're just trying to like entertain themselves. Sometimes it's because they're expressing pain. And so teaching them alternative ways of having fun and also alternative ways of expressing pain is really important. Next is to use classic problem-solving techniques to resolve actual disputes if there are any. We talked about that a lot in the EOT videos, so I would encourage you to kind of remember those or review those. It has a lot of important things about classic problem-solving. And then spend some time with the bully to help them work through what they're going on. Praise the heck out of situations where they perform well and where they're kind and when they feel like doing one thing but they handle it in a positive way. Make sure to praise. And also it's important to make sure the bully knows that you care about them, and that you can, this is a good time in the teaching phase to try to boost their self-esteem in positive and authentic ways and help them feel cared about and supported, because like I said, bullies need your love and your attention just as much as the targets do. The next thing is important to teach the targets. So teaching kids to ignore teasing is kind of hard to do, but it works well to make bullying less satisfying. I remember when I got picked on by my brother when I was little, my mom would always say, why do you react? Just ignore him. And that's hard to do, especially when people are being rude to you. But that's one thing, that's a quick fix, kind of, for someone who might be being bullied, is to tell them to just kind of ignore it, blow them off. It makes it less satisfying. Not being mean back, but just ignoring what they're saying can be helpful for kids. One thing that's kind of funny, this is something that's said in the training, and I don't know if I completely agree with it, but I think it works for some. It says, teach children to make fun of teasing. It takes the fun out of bullying and makes it seem silly. So if someone says, makes fun of them for being short, saying something like, oh, that's a good one, or is that the best you can think of? And your point is, just kind of turning it into something silly and not taking it seriously can make it seem not as fun for the bully. Also teaching kids to be assertive, teaching them that they don't have to put up with things, and it's okay to say, hey, I don't like the way that you're talking to me, or hey, don't say that. Teaching them to assert themselves when they're being picked on can be really helpful. And also teaching them to ask for help, that they can talk to adults, they can talk to people to help them. Sometimes it's counterproductive asking an adult for help right away, but sometimes it can be really helpful, especially if the child's safety is in question. So that's kind of what we can do to help targets and teach targets. The next thing is to monitor. So monitoring both bullies and their targets. So praising, using praise to guide their progress. Like I said, I think this is really important. Teaching the bully when they handle something well, praising them and saying, I was really impressed with how kind you were today, or I was really impressed, I know that you were having a hard time when your best friend sat by a different person at lunch, but it was great how you went and sat by, Nacho and were able to interact with him and get to know him. That was really cool how you got to make a new friend because of that. So praising can really be helpful and make the kids feel like they're not a failure and that they didn't necessarily do anything. It's okay to make them feel like they need to change their behavior, but it's also important for them to feel like you still care about them and that they're not, like a goner in your eyes. And then it's also, I think, important as a counselor to kind of spend time with those kids that are being bullies or are being targets, and creating opportunities for them to be successful. But in this monitoring process, it's also important to remove bullies from situations if they're not changing. This is really extreme, sending a child home because of bullying, but if it's becoming a really big problem, you don't have to deal with this alone either. You can enlist the help of the directors, and they can kind of help you figure out what the best thing to do in this situation is. Consulting parents is kind of like a last resort sort of thing. Warn the child, tell them to, that there'll be consequences if they can't figure it out. But in extreme cases, if things keep going on, you don't have to deal with it alone. Talk to the directors, and there are options available if it seems like people are being threatened or it's persistent. Talk about camp and use it as a place that it's different. It's different than any other place that they go. It's different from their school. It's different from their home. And so using camp as kind of like a novelty and showing them that this is a special place, can kind of help them redefine their roles. Sometimes it can help them teach tolerance and cooperation. Like, they might be a bully at school, but at Camp Kesem, it's different. Things are different at camp. And so they can be kind, and they can be, they can't deal with things the same way that they might at home, because Camp Kesem is different, and it's special, and it's a place where everyone can feel safe, loved, and respected. So if they see this as like a special, unique thing, they can sometimes redefine their social roles, I guess. Another thing to do is to redirect bullying behavior and suggest pro-social behaviors. So we're going to use the same example that I used earlier. If one child has a best friend that is now starting to hang out with another camper more, instead of instead of having them lash out or go tease either of those kids, a really good thing that you could do is help them say, hey, this is a good thing. Now you can have another friend. Like, maybe you should go sit by both of them at lunch and try to make another friend, because now you can get two friends instead of just one. So redirecting them into positive and pro-social behavior is really important, and they will follow your lead. They respect you so much, and they'll follow kind of the guidelines that you give them if it's given in the right way. Here are some just other thoughts on intervention and how to intervene when situations are people are being bullied. So the first thing is it's really important to not blame the child for being bullied. It's important to just make sure that the victim does not feel shamed or blamed for the situation that they're in, because most likely they didn't do anything to deserve it, really. Also, it's important to never tell a child to physically fight back. I know, parents sometimes will tell their kids, well, if he punches you, you can punch him back. That's fine. But we at Camp Kesem do not encourage that, and that's not what we want to tell campers. It's also important to make sure the bully knows what the problem behavior is. It's important to, not just tell a kid to stop. If they're calling someone mean names that have to do with race or religion or, gender, things like that, it's important to say, hey, instead of just saying, hey, stop being mean, saying, hey, stop calling, using those words when talking about that person. It's really can be hurtful. Stop calling people names, that sort of thing, so that they can give them specifics so that they know what behavior to avoid, because sometimes if you say stop, they don't really get what that means, I guess. The next thing is to make sure the bully knows what the problem behavior is, and being careful in the language that you use. Make sure that they know that it's a problem behavior, not a problem, that they're not a problem child. Make sure that bullies sometimes have low self-esteem, and so don't try to say anything or make them seem like a mean kid, because that adds to the problem and can create lower self-esteem, which can create more bullying. So just being careful in the way that you handle situations and being careful in the words that you use will be really helpful to make sure that the kid knows it's not them, it's what they're doing. It's not them that's the problem, it's the behavior. Again, this is another thing we've talked about, but praise. And be careful to not give backhanded compliments. If they do something nice, say, wow, try to compliment them in that, rather than saying something like, why can't you just always act like this? Because then it's kind of a backhanded compliment. So try to just give positive compliments that praise specific behaviors that they can kind of apply in situations that they might have had a hard time with before. Talk rather about the behavior you want to see, not just the behavior you don't want to see. So, if someone was teasing them and teasing a child and calling them names, instead of just saying, hey, don't call people names, even though that's important, and we talked about it's important to talk about spotting the problem behavior, it's also important to give them instead of doing that, what else can I do? Give them an alternative. So, if someone's calling someone mean names, it might be better to say, hey, instead of just say, don't call someone mean names, say, hey, if you have mean things to say, or you have something to, that's not very nice. Maybe you shouldn't say anything at all. Kind of like from, I think that's from Bambi. I don't know. Or saying, hey, if you, are saying mean things about someone's gender, like if you're talking mean about girls, maybe you should go hang out with a girl and see what they're really like. Go play with them and see, maybe they're actually pretty good at sports. I don't know, so give them kind of like an alternative, not rather than just telling them to stop a certain behavior. The next thing is just being a positive role model. Like I said, these kids look up to their counselors so much, and they appreciate what you do, and they respect you, and they want to earn your respect also. And so being a positive role model for them and making sure that you never say anything mean about someone, you're never making fun of anyone's race or religion or, ethnicity or gender, things like that. Being a positive role model in kind of modeling these good behaviors. If people are being exclusive, if kids are being exclusive and that's becoming a problem, make sure that you yourself are not being exclusive. Things like that. Just being really aware of what you're doing with and how you're acting can be really helpful to them. There's also ways to prevent bullying. We talked a lot about what to do if someone's is a bully, but we haven't talked a ton about prevention. So I just want to list a couple things about that. First is to set super clear rules and expectations right off the bat, because if they know, sometimes kids just don't really think about things. So if they know, we don't talk rudely about other people, and we don't make fun of people in this way, and, we never hit, even if it's funny. We just aren't going to do that. Setting rules and having them buy into those rules at the beginning will help, solve some of those problems. It's also important to make sure the consequences are appropriate and make sure the consequences are known. If kids know what will happen and they know why it will happen, they're less likely to do those things. They don't want those consequences. So setting consequences that are appropriate right off the bat can be helpful. It's also helpful to have campers create connections with other campers. The more friends that they have and the more that their social circle can be expanded, the easier it is for them to, not feel like that social circle is being attacked. So if they just have one friend and that one friend hangs out with another person, it might feel like, their whole social circle is being taken away from them, and that might have them lash out. But if they have a lot of connections with a lot of campers, those campers can kind of help them feel secure in their relationships and in their social standing. And then, be careful in your own interactions. Make sure you're not talking about anyone behind their back. Avoid gossiping. And make sure that you're being aware and that there's proper supervision for your campers. So those are the biggest things about bullying. And like I said, this is something that I haven't really experienced at camp, but I think the biggest thing that you might experience is that kids are bullies on accident, that they just think it's funny. They are kind of in that playful teasing mode, and they keep saying something that might actually spark some hurt feelings. So just know your campers, know your kids, make sure that you're being aware of what's going on and how people are interacting with each other, and never be afraid to enlist the help of the directors if something seems a little more serious or a little more harmful. Like I said, these kids love each other. For the most part, these kids are best friends, so, but it still can happen. So just be aware. You guys will be awesome. You're all good examples of being kind and non-bullies, so I'm not worried about that. But, okay, thank you so much for watching this bullying training, and we'll see you at camp.